the world of landscape fact or fiction, you might have preconceptions of some of these things that we're going to talk about here. What we're going to get into is the research behind these topics. Now, maybe the research will support what you have done, what you think, what you believe. Maybe it won't. So we will be learning today. I also just want to add, hey, folks, every yard is different. Every landscape is not the same as the other. So keep in mind what some things might work for you does not work for others. And we do try here at Extension to be non-biased, to give you the research-based information to be applied broadly across the state of Illinois. So hopefully we've crossed our I's and dotted our T's, or wait a second. Nope, I said that wrong, but it's too late. Here we go. First off, we are going to be talking about soils, specifically amendments and fertilizers. So it's time. First thing up here. All right, folks, I need, and again, this is the point. If you want to say yay or nay in the chat box, I would love that. We'd love to see, the chat box just going crazy. But my first question, do plants need to eat their vitamins? So in this scenario, vitamin B1 is often mixed with fertilizers or plant hormones. And the reason we do this, we do this for newly transplanted plants, and we say it stimulates new root development and can help reduce transplant shock. So folks, is it true, fact or fiction? Do we need to be adding vitamins to the potting soil or to the ground where we're planting our plants? Oh, look at that. Oh, the chat box is lighting up. I love this. Yeah, so we're getting no's and fictions, trues, fictions, no, yes. Not to healthy soil. I love this. Great response. I'm not going to keep you waiting forever. Here's what the answer is. Folks, plants make their own vitamins. So they do this not by us adding them into a planting hole. That really actually does nothing for the plant. One of the best methods for encouraging root development of a newly transplanted plant is to try something like a plant hormone or a growth hormone, such as auxin. And these growth hormones are actually pretty widely available at a lot of garden centers across the country, from the big box to the little person. All right, so that's kind of the format for the show. Now you kind of get it. On to the next. Biostimulants, snake oil or miracle product. All right, in this scenario, we have biostimulants. These are things that include humic acid, kelp, probiotics, and other kind of low nutrient items, things that have a little bit of NPK and maybe a few other nutrients in them, but not at a high level. Okay, we apply these to initiate various plant responses, whether we want growth, better yield, or maybe we want better resistance to different stresses. We do this, and the way it works is through stimulation of the plant hormones. So tell me, folks, biostimulants, are these miracle products, or are they selling us snake oil? Oh, contention arises in the chat box. Miracle products, snake oil, snake oil. Well, folks, here we go. Actually, we have no consistent positive effect on that has shown plants have had any type of a positive effect when using biostimulants. Now, what does that mean in science? That means we have research studies that have shown that there has been some effect. We have had studies that show no effect. When we try to replicate the ones that show positive effect, we don't get the same result. So we don't have that consistency. So yes, you might see research papers that support the use of biostimulants. You might see them that do not. That's the way science works. So as a consensus or as a whole, there is no consistent positive effect shown with the use of biostimulants. So what do we do? Well, it's all about the culture of the plant. And if you've ever been to an extension program, you know it's all about good plant selection, installing the plant correctly or in the right spot, and then taking care of that plant appropriately, the way it needs to be taken care of. Those have reliably shown to be the most effective way to improve growth, yield, or resistance to stresses. It's not in what we spray on it, it's what we do to that plant and how we take care of it. So I do want to share some pictures with you though. You know, oftentimes when I did landscaping, well, a long time ago, we would roll up on jobs and this was what we would encounter. A post-construction soil, as I call it. And so what has happened here is there's, new foundation work, new digging, earthwork has occurred here, and it's really disturbed and mixed up that soil structure. And so at one of our extension offices here in McDonough County, where I am, we had an addition made, and as you can see, look at that lousy post-construction soil. A lot of plants here are not very happy to grow, and I'll even zoom in here, give you a closer look. That's what we're dealing with, folks. This is not good soil. Pretty rocky, gravelly in one spot, and then you walk over and then suddenly you're left with like a little clay pan underneath your feet. So essentially this is the soil structure here is not uniform. It's totally mixed. It's chaotic. And this is very common in landscape situations. This is very common when you have a new home that's built. So what do? Well, the landscaper can give you a quote to haul in fresh topsoil, but if you've ever seen that bill, dirt's expensive. Compost is expensive. And very often the homeowner would opt not to do that. And so what we do is we put down the lawn seed or roll out the sod and call it good. But what could we do to improve the soil if we maybe had a little bit extra budget or on the cheap? Well, let's see. So in the situation, I did a couple different treatments. On the far left side of your screen, you'll see that darker strip of soil. That is compost. And essentially that's compost that's just top dressed or laid on top of that ground. Next to that is actually a strip where it's compost, but it's tilled in. Further down the line, we have our biostimulant treatment. Now, as you can see, the soil has been lightly disturbed. Basically, we ran the tiller down there at about an inch at a depth of about half an inch. So barely disturbing that area. And the reason for doing that is just so that we can create a seed bed to receive that lawn seed that we're going to be putting down. And then the area next, that's actually subsoiled. So actually we take a subsoiler and we create these vertical it's kind of like a big plow, single shank plow with the arrowhead at the bottom. You create these vertical slits in the ground. It kind of lifts and opens up the soil, gets a lot of air, water down through that soil profile. And then farther on the farthest right side of that screen or upper side of that screen is the control where we did nothing. So what happened? Well, folks, if you've ever seeded a lawn, you kind of know what happens that first year. It didn't look very good. Now, this is the biostimulant plot here that we applied the biostimulant. Remember, to the left is where we tilled in compost, and to the right is where we did the subsoiling. Now, to the left, we kind of wonder if we got a bad batch of compost because it just kind of grew up in crabgrass and gross, clover, things like that. But as you can see, nothing in terms of that first year, just a few weeks after germination of what we have here in that biostimulant. Let's fast forward to next year. Well, there we go. We do have some clover and we have some crabgrass. But again, if we look to the left of that, again, crabgrass predominates that compost amended soil. Because remember, we tilled it. We had a lot of disturbance there to that soil. Again, the biostimulant there in the middle. And then you can see that narrow strip on the right where we subsoiled. And really, the end results of these is this. It all looks good. It all mows, and that's fine for me and for a lot of people, maybe not others. But really, that biostimulant plot's really right in front of that door there. You can see that's dark green. That's a good stand of Kentucky bluegrass. Does that mean that the biostimulants is to take all the credit? Well, probably not. When you kind of look at the process as a whole, you realize that both the biostimulant and the subsoiling produce the best stand of turf grass. Again, it's more than likely because it was because we disturbed the soil very little. Again, we just tilled that top half inch. We weren't turning that soil over to incorporate compost as we did with the plots on the one side of it. So again, inconclusive, right? But for the most part, when you ask an extension educator, they would say, don't waste your money on a biostimulant. Okay, that was a long one right there. We got a lot to go still, folks. So let's go. Latte, skim, extra foam, sugar-free, and easy on the soil. So in this scenario, you will often see a post, say on Facebook, or whatever social media drink of choice you use. They suggest that coffee drinking gardeners should sprinkle their spent grounds around their plants. Now, because coffee grounds are natural, they will break down and give your plants a little pick-me-up. All right, folks, what do you think? Should we be using coffee out in the garden, in the landscape? While you're responding there, I saw that, Amy, what's an example of a biostimulant? There's not very many common product names that I know. I actually have a few under my desks that we've tested in various applications here. But typically what you find in the ingredient list are things like humic acid, kelp, just kind of seemingly random organic materials that they put in there. Even probiotics would be listed as one of the ingredients. So again, I don't have a product name to give you, but that's what you would tend to find in the ingredients. So, all right, coffee. What happens when we put it on the ground, folks? Well, some plants actually do pretty well when you put coffee ground amendments around them, such as lettuce. However, there are some, like tomatoes, that can be negatively affected. Okay, folks, let's keep in mind that coffee grounds, is that composted? No. It'd be kind of like taking, a bag of wet peas and grinding them up and sprinkling them on the garden. Even if there are nutrients locked in those peas, they are just that. They're locked in there. Those molecules have to be broken down to create plant available nutrients. So ideally, you would be composting these coffee grounds prior to applying them to the soil. However, keep in mind how acidic these coffee grounds can be. You do have to monitor compost piles. If you are adding coffee grounds on them, you have to monitor their pH. I used to have a worm bin, and we would add coffee grounds to that. And over time, we actually created a very inhospitable environment for our worms because of how acidic our compost became. So, folks, make sure, again, everything, it sounds so cut and dry. Just dump your coffee grounds out on the ground. But you know what? You have to be careful, and you have to maybe do a little bit of research up front, or hey, call us, the extension folks. All right, eggs. Fried, scrambled, poached, boiled, or buried. Eggshells have the potential to yield protein for fried chicken or an omelet, but many gardeners claim eggshells can also give us healthy tomatoes. The claim states eggshells supply calcium to our plants, folks. Eggshells. Eggshells in the garden. What do you think? I'd say right now we are a house divided. Aha, some of you are getting it here. Let's go ahead with the answer. Well, by themselves, eggshells provide very little plant available calcium immediately, like right away. It's going to take time and about one growing season for the eggshells to decompose and the calcium to become plant available, because calcium as a molecular structure is very, very tough. Takes a lot of effort for those microorganisms and for time to break that down to make that calcium become free in the soil and available to plants. Now, there are tricks that you can do to actually extract that calcium a little bit quicker. One trick here is to boil any used eggshells. You then let that concoction sit overnight. The next day, you strain the eggshells out of that water, and now you have a liquid solution with plant available calcium. And that's something that you could then apply to your plants. Well, do you have any specific instructions on this? Because we sure do love recipes. We're talking about eggs, all right? All right, so a study showed that for one eggshell, you can add 4 milligrams of calcium and also potassium, because it's in there too, to a solution. So what can you do? So use 4 or 5 eggshells per plant. You mix that in the soil or the planting hole. Now, if you just mix them as just cracked eggshells, you got to wait for that year, right? Well, here's another trick. You can grind that up into like a powder form. Doing that increases the surface area, which allows more microorganisms to attach themselves to that teeny tiny piece of eggshell and break it down faster. Or if you want to go with the whole boiling eggshells in water technique, you boil about 10 to 20 eggshells. Folks, if you like angel food cake, this could be something for you because you use a lot of eggs with angel food cake. So you boil about 10 to 20 eggshells and you use that liquid. So about 2 cups of that solution should be adequate per plant. Interesting. Well, fascinating. And if you are curious, folks, at the end, I do have references where I'm pulling this information from. So again, question me, I don't know. Question the scientist, that sounds better. All right, when you got to go, folks, at the playground, you turn to find your child or grandchild urinating on a tree. Well, you immediately yell to stop, but the child turns around and says, Grandpa said it's good for the plants. Okay, folks, should we be urinating out in our landscape? I think most people, it seems like just from a decency standpoint, I'm getting lots of no's. There's a few yeses in there. Well, yeses, you got it. Turns out Grandpa was onto something. Research shows that the use of urine as a fertilizer works just fine. Human urine actually contains high levels of nitrogen, about 10 times more than what you would find in a liquid fertilizer. Oh boy, what does that mean? You got to dilute it, folks. If you're going to be using that out in your landscape, please dilute it. You can apply this homemade product to annuals, perennials, trees, shrubs, but, big but, not to edible crops. Now, as I was looking through this research, actually some of the authors did state that they had not seen any anything from the medical world showing that foodborne illness was transferred using urine, but I cannot in good conscience say to you, yeah, sure, put that on your lettuce because and then have me over for dinner. No, thank you. All right, folks, that was soil. Now let's talk about cultural practices. Aha, it's a cover-up. In this scenario, we have landscape fabric, everyone's favorite thing, right? We laid this on top of the soil to keep weeds down while letting water and oxygen through. Folks, are you users of landscape fabric or are you not? Not much love for landscape fabric here. And I can tell you why, folks. Yeah, they work for a little bit. As a landscaper, we often say as long for that warranty to be done in that year's time. But research has shown that over time, the pores in landscape fabric fill with soil particles, which then makes it impervious to water and air. And if there's one thing we know that our plants and a healthy soil need is a good water and air exchange from the atmosphere into the ground. So additionally, what happens is weed seeds blow in and grow on top of the fabric. Folks, I could not talk about this without showing you my own little experiment. So in my backyard, we recently moved into this home. This would have been back in 2013. Lots of lawn. You know, I don't like to mow. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to try to transition away from lawn into some planting beds. Now, what we did here is we did one half of the yard in landscape fabric, as you can see here. You know, we graded it and leveled it and began planting some things. And then we did the other half without landscape fabric. Now, in this case, I was kind of comparing between landscape fabric and cardboard. Now, I know that there is definitely some drawbacks to using cardboard in the landscape. So I just want to put that out up front. Sometimes people get a little carried away with cardboard and you wind up creating a pretty inhospitable zone for your plants. All right, so that's how we put it in. But what about long term? Let's fast forward 2 years. So that's where we put the cardboard down. It was cardboard, and we top dressed that cardboard with wood mulch. About 2 years' time, hey, the mulch is gone, cardboard's gone, but we got some weeds, don't we? Yes, indeed. Well, okay, turn the head and look over to the other side of the yard. Landscape fabric side. Mulch is still not quite decomposed, but we're starting to obviously be getting weeds growing on top and through that landscape fabric. And it's just, ugly. And really what wound up happening here is the areas that had landscape fabric, if you've ever pulled a weed and there's been landscape fabric there, you realize that you wind up pulling up a huge chunk of that fabric when you're doing that. So it really becomes more of a nuisance than beneficial when it comes to long-term, being helpful in terms of weed suppression. And in this case, we didn't have a good interface between that wood mulch and the soil. We had a piece of fabric between. So the wood mulch didn't decompose and it was not able to incorporate that organic matter into the soils. And in horticulture, folks, we could do a lot for these plants, but that foundation, that key, that core, the bottom line is soil. So it's all about soil management and soil health. Just keep that in mind. We tend not to recommend landscape fabric in landscape beds like this. It does have its application. Actually, I have it in my vegetable garden right now. It sits between where the plants grow. So it works really well in those settings where I can easily take it up, remove it, put it down again some other time. So it has its application, but just be cautious. And especially if you are an avid gardener and you like to add new plants, take out plants, you're always throwing things in and pulling things out, the fabric just gets in the way. So again, there you have it. That's the story. Shredding in the landscape. In this scenario here, rubber mulch. So this is a clever way to reuse old tires. Plus, it lasts forever. It's more sustainable than shredded wood mulch or rock because we're taking a product and we're reusing it. All right. Do you think we should be putting rubber mulch in our landscapes? Hearing some strong no's out there. No's and no's and no's. Paths only. That's not a bad idea. But no, 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 no. And folks, a tire disposed in an unregulated landfill, so tossed in the ditch, essentially, is considered hazardous waste. How does dumping the shredded remains of tires around your roses make this any different? Okay. Rubber does decompose. It does break down with time. And it does actually have pests that like to chomp around on it. The Asian cockroach would be one of those. So along with certain other bacteria and fungi, that actually favor this rubber material. Now, remember, this is made out of things like plasticizers, accelerants, and hydrocarbons, which, we're hydrocarbons too, folks. But you got to keep all that in mind. Many of these are known carcinogens. It breaks down into the soil. I would have to say, when I was a young lad learning landscaping down in Southern Illinois, Carbondale, and this whole rubber mulch thing became a fad, oh boy, the folks, they showed up to the ag department. They said, hey, we are going to put Saluki maroon rubber mulch in the planting areas in your parking lots. How could we say no? It looked great. It looked wonderful that first year. But then, guys, in Southern Illinois, it gets hot. And when it gets really hot, what does it smell like? It smells like tires. It smells like hot tires. It also began to decompose. And you saw settling. And then the color, the paint, wore away. And it is obvious what's sitting there in the middle of that parking lot, which is just shredded up tires. So again, not recommended for those purposes. All right, here's kind of another similar situation. Railroad ties. This is a great product because we get to reuse them in the home garden. You put retaining walls, raised beds, we can make vegetable gardens and landscapes out of these. So guys, can we be using these railroad ties? A lot of you have been doing your homework. Thank you for studying ahead of class today. The use of railroad ties is actually illegal in the home landscape. These products have always been labeled for commercial and industrial use, not residential. Ladies and gentlemen, I live in a part of the country that's very proud of the railroads. And so there are people that will put these in their yards to show their pride. But yes, these things are treated with some pretty nasty stuff to keep them from rotting when they're sitting there on the ground. Before 2004, if you had bought treated lumber, say at the hardware store, So this is stuff approved for use in residential areas. It was treated with chromated copper arsenate. Arsenic. Yeah, that's it. That's right. Better known as CCA. The use of this product has since been banned since 2004, but it is still used in commercial and industrial wood products. So now, typically, you would not be finding this in, say, a home gardens center, but it is something to make sure that you're checking the end or that tag on that treated lumber to make sure what you're buying is, not accidentally sorted in among the residential stuff. But typically, you would not find that, but it never hurts to just double check. Yeah, you might be asking, well, what do we have right now? Well, in its place of CCA, we have ACQ. Now, this is treated lumber that is treated with like a copper type product. Now, we do know that the copper still leaches out into the soil, but at a very low non-toxic type rate. Bottom line, folks, if you got to keep in mind, we have no evidence to show that ACQ lumber makes any type of food crop toxic to humans. But if you don't like using treated lumber, fortunately, we do have other options such as cedar, and I know that's expensive, stone, we can use landscape block, brick. In my case, I just use cheap yellow pine. It decomposes after a few years, but that's fine with me. It doesn't cost me much money, and it doesn't really bother me to have to replace it. So we do have options for us folks. Well, I promise not to get into controversy to my good growing colleagues, but I lied. Let's talk about pesticides here and everything nice. Sugar. It's useful as an herbicide. By sprinkling sugar on your garden, it stimulates bacterial growth, which ties up nitrogen, thereby starving the weeds. Folks, fact or fiction, can we use sugar as an herbicide? I know, very interesting premise here, isn't it? Very, very interesting. And, they're onto something because it does work. It ties up the nitrogen, it starves the weeds and any other plants nearby. So, if the garden is not hospitable to weeds, it is also not going to be hospitable to your desirable plants. Besides, can't we get better uses for our sugar? I mean, cake, cookies. That's where sugar is supposed to go. There you go. All right. This is it. Going all natural. The organic debate. The use of organic pesticides, are safer for humans and the environment. So that's why we're gonna use them. What do you think? Fact or fiction? Organic versus conventional. Kelly Alsop, you have got it. It depends. Okay, folks. Organic versus synthetic, botanically derived pesticides, which would be the organic ones, are not always safer. In fact, some can be more dangerous. So here is a chart of LD50 values. LD50 stands for lethal dose within 50% of the test population. And unfortunately, in this case, it's mostly mice. The lower the number, the less amount of product it takes to kill half of that population. Now, if you'll see here, nicotine, 55. Whoa, that's pretty toxic. Now, nicotine, you will not find that listed in any type of a pesticide formulation because it's not labeled or listed to be used as a pesticide because it is very toxic. However, you can go online and you can find all different types of recipes that call for the use of nicotine to kill the bugs, say, eating your plants. Folks, some of these recipes are incredibly dangerous, so you have to be very, very careful, but they're touted as being quote unquote safe because they're natural. Now, we know that's not true. Nature wants to kill us all the time. Current today is evidence of that. Now, within this table here, you can see along the spectrum of, on the top, highly toxic, to on the bottom, very low toxicity. The two kind of chemicals or active ingredients here in bold, those are synthetic. The ones not in bold, those are all organic. Again, have to be cautious of how we group things. It's really not appropriate to group organics all in one group and say, hey, these are safe, and the synthetics, hey, these are not safe, because they operate within a spectrum. And you know what? It's a pesticide. It doesn't matter if it's an organic one or synthetic. It's made to kill another living thing. So what do? It's important when you're selecting a pesticide to know the properties, like its toxicity and how long does it hang out in the environment. Okay. So I glanced over at the chat box, the weed question. What is the organic option for killing weeds? Well, unfortunately, there's not a good one. Some of the best organic options are hand pulling, cultivation, flame weeding. Now, flame weeding, keep in mind, you could explode. So that's quite an acute toxicity right there, folks. So you don't have very many good options. Now, there are some things. You have herbicidal vinegar, but again, look at the acute dangers of that. Highly caustic. You get that in your eyes, you could possibly be blinded. So you have to make sure that you are wearing proper PPE, that you're protecting yourself. And that same thing can be said with synthetic pesticides too. So just make sure that you're looking at these different items here, like toxicity, environmental persistence. One tool that you can use is you can look up Cornell EIQ, which stands for Environmental Impact Quotient. The EIQ number, not perfect, not a perfect system, but is certainly a good technique for selecting pesticides. It basically takes three factors of the pesticide. First off, its toxicity, epidemiological studies, and hazards to the environment. Takes those, assigns each one a value, averages them. The lower the average, the better or the less risk that you have with that pesticide. The higher the number, the greater the risk. So you can go, again, you can ask Mr. Google Pants. Again, it's Cornell EIQ. You'll download an Excel spreadsheet. It'll be all of the EPA listed pesticides and their EIQ number. Instead of thinking of them as safe, remember, they're not safe, organic or synthetic. Safety is the wrong way to think about it. Levels of risk is probably a more accurate way to describe dealing with a pesticide. You manage those risks and you lower your risks. The best way to lower your risk is be conservative with using pesticides. They are overused in the landscape. Per acre, homeowners use way more pesticides than a commercial agricultural operation. We overuse them. Be conservative in what chemicals you use. It doesn't matter if it's organic or synthetic. We over apply them in general. Woo, okay. Controversy out of the way. Let's get to water. All right, what an absorbing strategy here. Water absorbing crystals placed in planting holes will slowly release water back out to that plant, meaning you don't have to water as often. Oh, that's perfect. And it helps keep that soil moist. Folks, are we on to something here? Do we need to patent this? Or has it been patented already? Water absorbing crystals in a planting hole. Good or bad? I like that. Sounds bad. So what are we going to do? These are pretty much the same hydrogels that we put in diapers, by the way. These crystals, they do absorb water and then they release it back out slowly. Aha, bingo, we got it. But, there's always a but. There is a point where the gel won't release any more water and will instead go in reverse and suck it all back up from the surrounding soil. Essentially, this is not a good substitute for watering. So if you are in a situation, say a drought, and the soil is drying out, these water absorbing crystals could actually create even more of a droughty environment among your plants. Now, This is, again, looking at the soil environment, so outside in the ground. This is not necessarily looking at potted plants. Potted plants are, a fairly artificial environment where you're watering them pretty much daily, and in the heat of the summer, sometimes twice, 2 times a day. And additional research is showing a growing concern of the byproducts as these hydrogels break down. Essentially, what we need is more research in this area to know how these hydrogels break down and what happens to the soil environment when they do. We just don't know. From drainage or drowning. All right, you can go anywhere in the internet, in the world, talk to your neighbors, and they'll probably say this. Take gravel or grit and pour this into your containers, to about 1/4 of the pot's depth. Why? Well, this is going to help water drain out from the bottom of so this is going to help your potted plants. So, folks, is this myth fact, fiction, good, bad? What do you think? I like that. I do it, but I've always wondered why. Martha Stewart wants you to use bubble wrap, folks. All right, you don't need much. Let's find out. Oh, well, in terms of improving drainage, gravel in the bottom of a container does not increase drainage. In fact, it can create a more of a waterlogged situation for your plants. And here's why. Water is an interesting element. It does not like to cross textural gradients. So it doesn't like going from that potting soil texture into that gravel texture. So what happens instead, it fills that upper layer to the point of saturation. And once it has nowhere else to go, gravity wins over and will then pull that water into the gravel. But if you don't fill it all the way up to saturation, your plant roots are going to be sitting in water longer. It's not going to be draining out of the bottom of that pot. So it really, it just doesn't work just because of the way water operates. I remember seeing this down at old SIUC, and the professor brought out a big aquarium, and in the bottom he put gravel, and in that top he put a layer of sand. He had several pitchers of water there, and he just started, as he was teaching class, he just started filling up this aquarium with water, and we're all just sort of like watching, kind of curious as to what was happening here. And as he was filling it up, we noticed the water wasn't going down into the gravel, but we saw that level of water going up and up and up in that sand layer. And it wasn't until that water saturated that sand layer that it went whoosh down into the gravel. Fascinating. It happens not only in pots, but also happens in nature. This is an experiment where they took water and they put a blue dye in it, just to show how water and they put it in this one area, and they just showed how the water just sort of spread out. Instead of going down, it just sort of spread out. It might be hard to see on your screen, so I bumped up the saturation in this next photograph here. So basically you can see where this water, where they put in this one square area, and instead of going down, following the force of gravity, it spreads out, because there's that topsoil layer, and then a few inches down, there's that subsoil layer, 2 different textural gradients. Now, as you can see, there's a few where the water goes down. A lot of those are channels created by roots or other microorganisms or macroorganisms in the soil. So it happens in nature. All right, turf grass, folks. Raise your turf. All right, raising the mowing height during the summer increases drought tolerance. Should we be raising the mowing height right now in the summer? Lots of yeses, one no idea. And that's what I've heard to do, said Amanda. It's probably Extension that told you to do it, because that is often what we say. However, folks, it's not always true. Let's go into some of the kind of the nuts and bolts of how grasses grow. Okay, So on this graph, and I apologize, it's two solid lines, but the line here says roots on the left side of that screen. It basically shows the root and shoot growth over the course of one growing season. So from January to December. So roots, you can see on that left side, there's a lot of growth that occurs in the spring. And that's when most of our cool season turf grasses are putting on their root growth, is in that springtime, because it's getting warmer. They're preparing for a hotter summer. But look what happens as it starts to get warmer. Once we get from June into July, that root growth almost ceases. It almost stops. But that shoot growth still keeps going. It still keeps growing up. A little bit ahead of that root growth. But what does that mean for mowing height? Well, okay. Really, just the answer right here, the higher the mowing height, the deeper the roots grow. Now, a plant is not going to create a root system to support an above ground growth that it doesn't need to. If there is a direct ratio of root to shoot growth. And so whatever mowing height you have, that is the root system that you have developed to support that plant. Okay, can I illustrate this graphically? Yeah, I think so. So let's say you have a 2-inch mowing height, which would be about the middle of this range here. And then you have that corresponding root system, as you can see. But, extension comes along and says, hey, in the summer months, you should raise that mowing height to then make your lawn more drought tolerant. So you do that. Remember that shoot growth continues a little bit faster and farther into the summer than the root growth. So say you raise it up all the way as high as it'll go to 3.5 inches. So now you have a 3.5-inch lawn, but that root growth, remember, it drops down to almost nothing when it gets hot out. So you still have a root system to only support 2 inches. And so what's the best advice here? If you mow it, say 2 inches, just leave it. Don't adjust it. That's the root system that you're trying to promote. If you mow it 1 inch, leave it. If you mow it 3.5 inches, leave it all year long. That's the recommendation. We do have some good suggestions coming in through the chat box, such as, yes, but important not to cut off more than 1/3. That is right, or else you stress out your plant. Moles. Aren't they cute? All right. The method for controlling the moles is to control the white grubs, because that's going to reduce the mole damage, because moles eat grubs, right? Right? Mm-hmm. Got a couple no's, some trues. It's a little slow on this one. We're not quite sure. I'm sure you're just distracted by how cute a mole is. Super cute, I know. Okay, well, folks, not quite true, because a mole's diet consists primarily of earthworms. Now, moles eat, they're carnivores. They are voracious carnivores. They are not herbivores. They want meat. They'll also eat other things living in the soil, like cicada larvae, any other insects. But most of the time, it's not going to be a white grub. They are hunting for earthworms. Now, if a grub seems to cross their path, sure, yeah, tasty. They'll eat it. But they really want those earthworms. That's why a lot of the poison baits that they make for moles, they're in the shape of a worm, and so just keep that in mind. If you want to control moles by controlling the earthworms, the toxic environment that you have to create in your soil, that's not going to be good for your garden. So sometimes it's just the live and let live. Very often when it comes to moles, one of the best techniques is trapping or natural predation. Typically, you think you have 100 moles. Usually you have 1. They're highly territorial. They'll come together to mate, raise their young. But they're also very opportunistic. So once one dies, another one will move in very quickly. A lot of things eat moles too, snakes, things like that, other predators. So having a diverse environment and tolerating some of the imperfections of nature. Trees. Aha. Trees, please. Batten down the branches. Newly planted trees should be staked down firmly and securely. Folks, we need to be staking our trees. Yes? Right? Oh, come on. I'm getting a lot of no's. All right, folks, what is the deal here? When it comes to staking our trees, most of the, and I say B&B, I mean bald and burlap trees, do not need staking. That root ball, that soil ball there is heavy enough to hold that tree in place just fine. Now, say you have a bare root tree and sometimes a containerized tree, because containers, they're grown in a soil-free mix, which is very lightweight. But really, bare root trees, they're shipped to you without soil around the roots, which means they can be very top heavy. So staking is useful in that situation. If you wind up staking a tree, you want to make sure that you place that staking material as low as possible and be flexible. You want that material to be able to allow that tree to move in the wind, because the ability for a tree to move in the wind builds up strength in the trunk. The tree responds to those wind loads by building up woody tissue at the base. We call that the trunk taper. That allows that tree to withstand heavy wind loads. So the tree has to be able to move. So too often, I see trees that are staked down so tightly they can't move at all, not an inch. Why are we imprisoning our trees? And make sure that we remember to remove the staking material after a few months, up to a year at the most. Now, say you're wondering what situations you would be staking a tree. Okay, there are some. If you live in a high wind area, which here where I'm at in central Illinois, if you're out in ag country where there's not a tree in sight and the wind blows, 30 miles per hour on a normal day, that would warrant staking. If you have vandalism, you have a lot of theft that occurs. We have put tree stakes down to make it more difficult for a tree to be stolen. And yes, folks, it does happen. Have you ever bought a tree at a garden center? They're expensive. It's worth a lot of money. And third, if you have errant mowers, whether it's a husband or a company, we can put staking material down to keep mowers away from the base of the tree, to keep them from damaging the trunk. So here is an example. This was in Monmouth, Illinois. I got a phone call. This is an oak. I believe it's a type of, can't see the leaves very well. It was many years ago. I think it's a type of a red oak. But what occurred here is this oak tree was staked for years and years. And you see those yellow bungee kind of nautical rope cord right there? Those are there because the tree was staked for so long. When the homeowners finally removed the staking material, the tree totally flopped over into that alleyway next to it. Didn't break. It just had no structure in the trunk whatsoever, and it could not support its own weight. Now, if you look at that, I mean, look how tall that tree is. It goes above the height of this photograph here. It's almost 2 stories tall. But look how thin and skinny that trunk is there at the base. Again, if you don't expose this tree to the elements, why is it going to devote resources to creating the woody tissue required to keep itself upright? All right, bad haircut. Like us, trees need haircuts too. So tree topping is necessary, and trees can always grow out of one of these bad haircuts, right? Yeah. No? Oh. Well, let's see here. Folks, I kind of take a hard stance on tree topping. I say it is an unjustifiable practice and has no redeeming benefit to the tree. A topped tree requires constant maintenance and becomes a hazard and liability for the homeowner. What a key word, liability. I think if more of us saw that and realized that we're actually creating a hazard for others and we are then liable for that hazard, we might not be doing that as often. Okay, what do I mean by this? Let's go to my hometown in West Central Illinois. I won't name names because we're posting this recording online and I don't want to get in too much trouble. I think I'm already in trouble, but whatever. Let's go down a street here in my hometown. Now here you can see a tree that had been previously topped. Um, hopefully you can see my mouse on the screen, but I am going to use it to show you. You see where those old top areas were? You know, and then that dense twiggy growth emerges from those stubs around that tree. You can kind of see some of those stubs there in that dense twiggy growth. You see those limbs hanging there? We call those widowmakers. Now, when this tree is fully leafed out, you cannot see those hanging limbs up there, but they're there. Because what happens when you top a tree, it initiates a growth response. You've removed the tree's food source. We do not feed the trees with fertilizer. The tree feeds itself through photosynthesis. So you've removed the food source. The tree needs to recoup that quickly. So they send out this dense, twiggy growth. It's weakly attached, far more susceptible to disease and other pests, and it just creates an ugly tree. This is one house. Let's go next door. Oh, see them again? These trees probably, maybe 4 years ago or so were topped. And you can just see how totally disrupts that natural habit or that form shape of the tree. And it creates these widowmakers up in the canopy that, once again, folks, when those leaves are there, you can't see those, but they're there. And if you're having a picnic down below on a windy day, it's very dangerous. A liability thing that I mentioned. More. I'm on the same road here, folks. Same street. Again, ouch. I mean, that's a big ouch. Wow. Ooh. I'm almost to the end of the block, I promise. Here we go. This is something different. Now, if you've ever been to Europe, you might have seen something like this. And there are other parts of the US that do this as well. This is a technique called pollarding. Now, pollarding is an aesthetic that was born out of function. If you look back into medieval times, they needed building material, they needed resources. One way they did that was to, in essence, top their trees. But then every year they harvested that dense twiggy growth that occurred, those epicormic shoots that sprouted up. They harvested those and they used that as building material to make, everything from homes to baskets, furniture, stuff like that. Now, this became such an integral part of lots of different areas of European culture or society. It became part of their culture. It became part of their aesthetic. And so now you go over there and, my German friend, she came back and she showed us pictures. And I looked like, why are you guys topping your trees like this? She's like, oh, no, this is totally different. This is pollarding. They remove that growth every year so it doesn't have time to develop into something that could break in a windstorm, So every year you can see, these like kind of burls that are developing at the ends of where these trees are topped. And so again, this is a different technique. This is something separate that's harvested every single year. And again, we look at it, we're like, that's ugly, but that's not part of our aesthetic, and everyone's aesthetic is different. That's their choices there. This is where I live in Macomb. Now, these trees were topped, obviously, by the power company, and it has now created this dense twiggy growth that's weakly attached to that main structural limb. So my question to you, do you think these power lines are now safer? Probably not. A good windstorm comes along and knocks a lot of those limbs down over on top of those power lines. So, okay, folks, we're getting close to an hour here. I am almost done. So you get what you pay for, folks. In this situation, the more expensive the plant material, the higher quality and the healthier of a plant that you will have long term. So do you get what you pay for? I like this. I think you're catching on. The extension motto, it depends. It always depends. Because it's complicated. When you're dealing with something that's living and alive, anything we've really talked about today, it is complicated. And there are always exceptions to the rules. You might work it out and you might have the most jammin' garden that anyone else has on the block. Someone else might do the exact same thing across town on the other side of the state, and it results in failure. That's because it's complicated. So when it comes to plant material, yeah, Those more expensive ones, they tend to do pretty good, but there are common nursery practices that you need to watch out for, especially as they try to sell you these trees, these designer trees. So I call this tree topping part 2. So in this image here, you can see what I call, these are maples. You can see these maples, I call them squid trees. It looks like a squid that's been planted upside down in the landscape. So you see all of these competing central leaders coming from this one spot. This leads to weak attachments, leads to failure in the future, and in my opinion, in terms of aesthetics, an ugly tree. So how did this happen? Well, a lot of times it happened back in the nursery. Now, I want to show you there's 2 basic tree forms. We have essentially this pyramidal form on the left side of the screen. You can see that strong central leader, those little side shoots coming off of the sides. Most of our shade trees, when they are juveniles, immature, when they're young, they have a pyramidal form. As trees age and mature, they then develop into, as we look on the right side, more of a rounded, maybe irregular type form. But when the common consumer, when they think of a tree in their brain noodles, what do they see? Do they see the whip of a tree on the left, or do they see the rounded tree on the right? They see the rounded tree on the right. And so the nurseries know this. And as they're developing plants to sell, what they've done here to this red oak, they've topped it. Again, see that central leader there? They pruned it. By pruning that, creates a bushier tree. It promotes side growth. It promotes side branching because those growth hormones, they no longer have that central leader to go. So then they're scrambling through all these other branches trying to establish a new central leader. And what often happens, let me back up, is you get trees that have co-dominant or competing central leaders, which again, that leads to a lot of problems in the future. Now here you can see they've retrained a new central leader. So that's good, but again, this is something that occurred not just once, but twice. Here's the first cut. There's the second cut up closer to the top. So this tree has been topped multiple times. This affects the structure long term. Look at this Japanese maple. All of these branches have been tipped. The central leader has been removed because it's trying to promote a more bushier type habit. It's fighting the genetics of that tree of being more of a pyramidal shape or having that strong central leader. Once that tree matures, yes, then you can start developing the habit of the typical Japanese maple that you might have. But you really should be working with the plant material, not against it like that, to create problems in the future. Okay, so what do you look for? That strong central leader, good branch angles. Avoid branch angles that are acute. You want more that are more wider branch angles. If you see suckers at the base of the tree, it's a bad sign. You want to make sure you can see that root flare at the base of the tree. And folks, most trees are planted too deep in the nursery. We can remedy that in the home landscape. So it's not the end of the world, but don't plant it too deep yourself. Want to see if there's multiple packing layers around the roots too. That kind of indicates how long this nursery has been trying to sell and holding on to this plant. And do you see any abnormalities? It's been a long hour, almost done, in any way along that trunk. That can be red flags that, go to somewhere else. Go get another tree. And in terms of that, I want to thank you. That's me hugging a tree. Got more stuff, though. These are the references that I used. These and among many other references from Illinois Extension horticulture educators who I lean on quite a bit. Thank you so much. And so some of these books, and actually I just wrote a blog article, the Good Growing blog. Just wrote an article about some of these books. I use them a lot. These are professors that have basically taken common garden practices and myths and just they've dug down deeper to see what are these true or are these not. So I highly recommend these books. Um, if you're interested in getting a copy of this presentation, you can go to go.illinois.edu/GG2020. You want to check us out? Hey, we got blogs, we got podcasts, we got all kinds of things for you.